Alright, so this is a suggestion via a donation. The name of the video is Capitalism is Destroying Us. This is coming from the channel Second Thought. Let's check it out. Right, guys.
This episode and others like it are made possible by the generous support of my patrons on Patreon. If you haven't heard already, I run a podcast called The Deprogram with Hakeem and Yugopnik. We tackle all sorts of topics, from theory to current events to
that is a super interesting image here, guys.
Culture, and just generally have a good time. If that sounds like something you'd enjoy, check out The Deprogram by following any of the links below. Global collapse is here.
Okay.
Our summers are longer, hotter, and deadlier. Floods, hurricanes, and wildfires have not only become increasingly common, but more intense. The oceans are rising, and thousands of species are going extinct. Millions of people will need to abandon the place they called home, and many have already started. We are living through the climate catastrophe, but it's not too late to act, and we already know how. Earlier this year, the UN published this report on crises and climate change. In a document with the catchy name Global Assessment Report on Disaster Risk Reduction 2022, more specifically in this companion paper, the UN uses a sentence it's never used before to describe what lies ahead for humanity: total societal collapse. After considering 4 potential scenarios, the UN finds that in 3 of them, humanity will face an increase in global catastrophes, with only 1 scenario staving off the worst that climate change will produce. 1 scenario keeps us relatively safe. 3 lead us down a very dark path.
Wow.
In no uncertain...
Guys, really quickly, I can kind of attest to this here. Where I live in America, very specifically, it has recently been getting hit by tornadoes a lot. It has never gotten hit by tornadoes. Guys, I've never experienced a tornado until a couple of months ago, when it basically removed the roof off of my house, broke all the windows, and knocked down 4 trees, guys, right? Keep that in mind. Gas leak everywhere. It was the craziest thing I've ever experienced in my entire life, and I've never dealt with it. But this seems to be a very like a North American thing, because when I'm in Spain, there are no catastrophes, guys, right? So I don't know if it's like extremely localized. Like, is America, North America, the United States of America, very specifically, causing this on ourselves, guys? Is it just us? Because it's not happening in Spain. Not at the same level, at least. I mean, we get earthquakes in Spain, but I mean that's pretty much normal, though, I think, right? But not tornadoes and these crazy, wicked thunderstorms. Because one just came through a couple of days ago, and knocked the power out for like 48 hours, guys. Right? In the middle of summer, a Georgia summer, where we're looking at probably over 100 degrees every day.
In terms, collapse, droughts, famines, poverty, disease. These will all become permanent and widespread features of human existence, provided that we do not act to remain within our planetary boundaries. And this report makes it clear that without immediate, decisive efforts, the feedback loops and codependencies between our climate and our politics will plunge the world into some dark and increasingly difficult to escape times.
Okay, now I understand the title.
But okay, who cares? We've heard this a million times before. Right. Yeah, some fish and bugs are dying. Yeah, it's getting hotter. It's getting harder to grow crops some places. So what? What's the bottom line here? I think it's important to look at the situation from a more human perspective. We've been told for years that we're on track for disaster. We've been given mountains of evidence, scores of scientific reports, and scientists all around the world are united in the same effort. But what gets lost in all this is how it affects us. Normal people in our everyday lives. Like, intellectually, I know that losing pollinating insects is bad, but Absolutely. Is it something I think about in my daily life? Not really. What's really driven the problem home for me is watching people's totally unprofessional phone footage. I can watch 100 news pieces about rising sea levels with flashy graphics showing the coastline of Florida, but it doesn't really click until I see someone showing their home being destroyed. Someone with no video training, no agenda, just a person who is watching a lifetime of memories being ruined and sharing it on the internet because they don't know what else to do. Right. That's what collapse looks like in the 21st century. Watching countless cell phone videos of death and destruction creeping closer and closer.
Bro, look out that window, guys. This is exactly what I saw looking out the window. this right here, bro. It was instantly, the most frightening thing I've ever experienced in my entire life. I think I still kind of have some type of like some trauma from it, and I am not someone who just talks about trauma, right? I'm referring to like some PTSD. I think it was a wild situation, guys. But imagine you're in your house, comfortable, and the roof is gone. Imagine, bro. All right.
That's what collapse looks like in the 21st century.
Like right here.
Watching countless cell phone videos of death and destruction creeping closer and closer until one day you're the one filming. It's hearing about.
I didn't even want to grab the camera, guys. That wasn't even a thing. I just wanted to make sure that my wife, my son were good. We basically hid inside of the basement laundry room that was pretty much sealed off, just had one window. And when we came out that door, bro, wow. All right. The trees. How about this, guys? The wind was so loud. First of all, it sounded like a freight train, right? And it was so loud we didn't even hear or feel the trees fall and hit the ground, guys. And we're talking about gigantic Georgia trees that are like 250 feet tall. Multiples of them just falling, guys.
A climate scientist lighting himself on fire in a desperate bid to get those in power to listen. For people like me, it's going to shoot a documentary in the Marshall Islands and seeing firsthand the waves knocking on the doors of people whose families have lived there for generations. Every single one of those people will have to leave. They'll have to
that looks like footage from Tulu.
Uproot their entire life, escape to some foreign country,
or Kiribati. It looks like footage from the island of Kiribati,
and watch their homeland sink into the sea. This will affect all of us. Some sooner than others, like the inhabitants of the Marshall Islands and countless other low-lying islands and coastlines. At some point, we will watch everything we care about be reclaimed by nature, or scorched beyond repair, or swept off the map by the next record-breaking storm. Even if you think climate change is perfectly natural, despite decades of research, much of which was actively hidden from the public by fossil fuel companies, why would you just wait and let it destroy your community? If you're out for a walk and a car is bearing down on you and you're clearly going to be run over, does it really matter whether the driver is intentionally trying to hit you or if his brakes are out?
No, it doesn't matter, bro.
Your response should be the same in either case. You step out of the way. So, how do we step out of the way? So far, the plan looks like this.
Okay. I often note and have talked with many of you about our shared belief that our world is increasingly more interconnected and interdependent. That is especially true when it comes to the climate crisis, which is why we will work together and continue to work together to address these issues, to tackle these challenges, and to work together as we continue to work operating from the new norms, rules, and agreements that we will convene to work together on to galvanize global action. With that, I thank you all. This is a matter of urgent priority for all of us, and I know we will work on this together.
Okay, why don't we actually look at our options? The first thing that's been proposed for years to slow or even halt the advance of climate change is the idea of green growth.
Okay.
From the World Bank to the Green New Deal, many governments and international organizations around the world have argued that our first priority in preventing the worst effects of climate change is to make capitalism go green. At the core of these proposals is the transition to renewable energies and the idea that, while a lot needs to change in how we produce our electricity, very little needs to fundamentally change with how our society organizes production and consumption writ large. In other words, we don't need to sacrifice growth, overproduction, overconsumption, or
we need to change the way it's basically powered.
Anything else, so long as we simply make things sustainable and renewable. Right. It's a project that plenty of banks and investment firms have latched onto as well, with the creation of environmental, social, and corporate governance, or ESG funds, in the past 20 years. Portfolios of companies to invest in that, among other things, offer a green alternative to traditional investments while also delivering consistent profits to investors. The overall message...
Yeah, because that's the only way that will function. Like, if it does not affect the people that are literally invested into, like, the S&P 500 or any type of NASDAQ, like, if it does not affect the people that are consistently looking to earn money off of their interest, then let's go for it. I'm sure everyone would be fine with it, right?
The message of all these measures is that so long as we make the right things profitable, we will get out of the climate change trap and come out, if not unscathed, at least safe. It's a win-win. It's growth without any of the moral hang-ups of environmental exploitation or the pollution of production and consumption. And while it might sound great to some, green growth is a lie. We cannot keep growing our economy year after year and also rein in climate change.
Oh, no.
One of them will need to give. Here's why.
Let's go. Listen, you had me there for a moment, but let's see where this is taking us, guys, because, this is going to be the problem. Whatever we're about to encounter right now is going to be the problem, and why people's very specific greed, right, it's just not going to work because of whatever he's about to say.
First, a little bit about growth. Our economy is based on the promise of growth. Every quarter, capitalist firms must deliver more to their investors than they did last quarter.
Absolutely.
Same with national GDP. Every company everywhere, and every country too, under capitalism, has to do the same thing. Grow exponentially or start suffering the consequences. Companies that don't grow when their competitors do, die. But growth isn't magical. At the scale of an entire country's economy, for the whole thing to grow, there must necessarily be a ramp-up in production. You can't just increase consumption, which is the way we measure growth, without producing more in some way or another. So we do. We produce more. More things, more energy, more waste. More production entails more extraction, transportation, carbon emissions, trash, and so on.
Guys, the concept of waste, America wastes, the United States of America waste a whole lot, guys. We just do, period. I think if we had like a better right to repair system, like bring back the people that would fix the things that were broken in your house. Oh, my TV broke. Let me call the TV repairman. Right? I don't think that exists anymore, does it? I don't know. If it does, congratulations. You're super niche because most people would probably throw it away. But if we had the ability, like as just an overall right built into when you purchase something, like right to repair, as in the company would actually sell the replacement parts to devices and things like that. I do think that absolutely would be able to help things, right? But the problem is, a lot of companies don't want that. Why? Because they want you to rebuy what you bought before. Right to repair as an actual right would change a lot of this.
We take more things out of the ground, move more things around, and throw more things away. It's what makes the numbers on the graph go up. But on a planet with finite resources, this kind of system doesn't work.
No.
We can't keep pulling more from the Earth year after year and not expect there to be a point when that's no longer an option. We can either plan for it, or we will be forced to reckon with it at the worst possible time.
Right,
and then it'll be too late.
Yeah, right.
And while green growth promises us this can change, that we can continue this project of growth without increasing extraction and production, there is empirical evidence that we cannot. In an analysis of multiple...
Okay, it makes sense. All right, I was initially like, okay, whatever he's about to say is people are going to hate, right? But as long as we can kind of, again, come up with something that can fix the waste, but then obviously by fixing the waste very specifically, companies' bottom lines will start to decrease. Absolutely, it will, because now people are not out rebuying the same thing. I'm sure if you looked about 100 years ago or even 50 years ago, you'll notice that all the products were built to last, built better, right? Now everything, regardless of how much you spend on it, is basically junk, guys. Like, have you ever, this may sound really, really crazy, but like, if you ever have a chance to like be in the presence of someone who has a Ferrari, or if you ever get a chance to sit in a Ferrari, bro, all of that is plastic. You're buying a name, bro. You're buying a name in a solidly built engine. That's what you're doing, guys. It doesn't cost what it costs. It's the name recognition of the product, right? And so it's not about this is a super valuable thing. Like, look at a 1950s Ferrari or 1958 or 60. You're going to realize instantly that those were built better. They still weren't worth the cost, right? But those were built better. Everything was built better. They were built to last. Now they're built to be replaced. Period.
Green growth models. Two economists have found that even in the best case scenario, the idea of green growth does not work. That's considering any prediction model, no matter how optimistic. In their paper, Hickel and Callis find that extant empirical evidence does not support the theory of green growth, or more precisely, that there is no evidence that we can have sustainability and growth at the same time, at least as we're first transitioning.
Okay.
All the economic, environmental models they look at only work when GDP growth approaches zero, or in other words, when growth is factored out of the equation.
Right.
The problem is not that it's theoretically impossible to make our economy sustainable or founded on renewable energy. We can do all that and continue to live very fulfilling lives without needing our standards of living to drop. The problem is that it's not going to be profitable or quick enough by any metric, even the most optimistic of estimates. While it might be a successful model someday, green growth won't work in time. The problem is that while it's possible to transition to 100% renewable energy, we cannot do it fast enough to stay under 1.5 or 2 degrees Celsius if we continue to grow the global economy at existing rates.
But also keep in mind, like, the developing countries, like, they are probably using a lot of the non-renewable sources of energy at a rate that's crazy. They're the ones that are really doing it, right? I mean, us sitting in the first world nation can easily say, why don't we do this? Because we've already made all of our money during those big booms of using terrible energy for the planet. Absolutely, right? But how can we go to them and be like, you can't do what we did to succeed? Impossible. Bro, that's not okay, right? I mean, unless we find a way to power the entire planet, it would have to be something like that. We would have to find a way for developing nations to not continue to pollute, and also China. All right, like large population centers would have to get on board with this. And until then, I mean, we can keep talking about all these grandiose ideas, guys, but without that, what do we really? Like, it's nice to sit here and have a pleasant conversation about everyone kind of moving over to some type of renewable energy. But again, guys, we can't tell them to stop doing what we did to get where we are. But they need to. I get it. They need to. Who's going to pay for it? All right, let's get it.
Again, more growth means more energy demand, and more energy demand makes it all the more difficult, impossible in fact, to generate enough renewable capacity to meet it. We can't grow and transition to renewables fast enough to match that growth. It's already hard enough to have it meet our current demands, and the time frame isn't working in our favor, even when we're generous with our estimates. Then there's the fact that this approach isn't working as expected right now. Those ESG funds I mentioned earlier, the funds that offer green investment alternatives, they're not always profitable, and oftentimes less profitable than their fossil-dependent counterparts. If our goal is to wait for the market to make the best, most sustainable option also become the most profitable, we will be waiting a long time.
Right.
Too long. But we don't need to get into the technical or scientific breakdowns of individual green growth models to see.
Can we please do that? That'll be really nice so I can fully comprehend
How this general approach is wrong. Even if we assume that Hickel and Callis' analysis is completely incorrect, and that the green growth models they criticize actually do get it right, and in time to prevent 1.5 to 2 degrees Celsius of global warming, there is a much greater obstacle in our way: power. The oil and gas industry is the most capitalized industry in the world. Simply put, that means that oil and gas is where the most money is. More money is concentrated in fossil fuels than in all of retail, or all of banking, or all of the tech sector. The total capitalization of the oil and gas industry is equivalent to $6.7 trillion. If we think of global capitalism as the arena where competition between industries happens, then this is a competition where fossil fuels have the best hand. Fossil fuels have the most money, and therefore the most power. In concrete terms, that means the oil and gas industry has the ability to prevent almost any sort of action that would hurt its interests. While we can theorize about green growth models and what happens if we transition to renewables at this or that rate, with this or that expected level of growth.
Yeah, but like, look at this madness, bro. Look at this. Look at all of this, bro. You're ruining the earth, people.
The fossil fuel industry can prevent all of it from happening.
Don't get me wrong. I prefer gas vehicles. I get it. I'm a savage. I get it. Right. Listen, I understand electric vehicles may, at one time be able to kind of meet the needs of someone like me, right? But until I see a super off-road capable vehicle that I can lift and throw, 40s on, right? Until then, I don't know. It just doesn't suit me, bro. I'd rather drive. Listen, until it can do that, then we can have a conversation, right? Period.
It can sabotage like no other industry can. At the government level, fossil fuels have been lining the pockets of politicians for years, with prominent figures like Joe Manchin receiving millions of dollars from the coal industry to block the passage of even the most lukewarm anti-emission plans. In the media, fossil fuel companies have been discrediting climate change science for decades, with advertisements and fossil-friendly journalists obscuring the evidence or trying to spin attention away.
Guys, one of the American politicians had said something one time. I have no idea if they were on the left or the right. I really don't. I'm not one of these people who care about what party this person is that's speaking. Well, one of these people said something about like getting overall money out of politics, right? And if I think, honestly, like a voucher system, if you want to donate to someone, a voucher system would probably be the most beneficial way to do that, right? Like, hey, listen, every American gets a book of tickets or something, right? And now you have the, sorry, I'm not talking about thinking too much. Listen, so you have the ability now to basically deliver, like, let's say a ticket or so to a politician, right? That politician now knows that they're going to have the most backing because they have the most vouchers, whatever it is, right? Or set an overall limit. No one can give more than $100 to a politician, right? Now one very specific lobby won't have the ability to just alter everything, period, right? Now this politician is kind of bound to whatever system that they were talking about setting up, guys. They're bound to it because now they have the majority of these people giving them their vouchers, if that makes any sense. Like, money out of politics would be absolutely amazing, very specifically in the United States of America. It is toxic. These companies absolutely are ruining America, the planet, because, if we're leading in our economy, then we're ruining the planet, not just America. So, all right, get money out of politics, and then we can probably have a much more equitable, let's say, right, planet. I would think personally, right, because now you don't have all this one group lording over everyone else.
Like in this horrifying clip from this summer.
On a serious note, folks, by early next week, you can scrap 20 degrees. It could well be 40 degrees. I think there will be hundreds, if not thousands, of excess deaths early next week. The charts that I can see in front of me are frightening. So we all like nice weather, but this will not be nice weather. This will be potentially lethal weather for a couple of days. It'll be brief, but it'll be brutal. So,
John, So, John, I want us to be happy about the weather and every single. I don't know whether something's happened to meteorologists to make you all a little bit fatalistic and harbingers of doom. Because all of the broadcasts, particularly on the BBC, every time I've turned on anyone's talking about the weather, they're saying that there's going to be tons of fatalities. But haven't we always had hot weather?
Not at this level.
More recently, fossil fuel companies have switched to presenting climate change as though it's a problem of individual consumption, like in a series of BP ads I covered in this video, rather than an economy-wide problem in the way we organize production. Fossil fuel companies have also worked for decades to bury renewable energy production and alternative ways to consume energy. They've tried to kill electric cars, an alternative that only ever offered a minuscule environmental benefit compared to gas-powered cars, but nonetheless threatens fossil fuels' commanding market share. Our entire social reproduction is happening under the ruling hand of fossil fuels. The way our society produces, consumes, and then justifies these practices in legal and cultural texts is heavily directed by fossil fuels and their interests. They decide what gets made, how it's advertised, how it's regulated, and at the end of the day, how we're meant to feel about it. Even if we could get all the green growth models to work in theory, if we could make our energy use optimally efficient, or even give up on the idea of growth entirely, our transition to a sustainable economy will not happen with fossil fuel interests standing in the way. So long as they are committed to being the most powerful player in the global economy, whether that's a growing economy or not, they will prevent change from happening. And what's terrifying is that their power will likely only grow over time as fossil fuels become more scarce and we are still trapped on their sinking ship. While we've been told that the coming scarcity of oil will push us into renewable energy sooner, scarcity is the name of the capitalist game. You can't make money when something's abundant. It's when it's scarce that the big bucks come in. The more
that's when they're gonna go harder.
Global oil reserves slowly dwindle, or the more we place restrictions on how much we allow to be extracted without directly controlling prices, the more valuable that oil becomes, and the more profits can be extracted from its sale. Look no further than what is happening right now. 2022 has been a year of record profits for oil and gas companies. To take a specific example, one French fossil fuel company, Total Energy, saw bigger earnings this year than any other company has in the entire history of the French economy. What all this means is that a small handful of people, led by the sole motivation to deliver greater profits than their competitors year after year, are making decisions that benefit their interests over those of the rest of humanity. They are fiercely clinging to their profits at the expense of our collective survival. The solution is obvious. We need an economic model that is democratic, that takes power away from the unaccountable few and returns it to the many. While many people tend to think of capitalism and democracy,
what's funny is that I would think that hearing someone say this out loud, I think it's a good idea, right? But that kind of goes to getting money out of politics again, right? I mean, taking money out of politics would absolutely relieve a lot. That would fix it probably almost instantly, because it takes it from those super wealthy people who literally don't care. They don't care about what everyone else is doing at the bottom, bro. They don't care.
As synonyms, the case of what to do about climate change is a great example of why equating these two terms is misguided. Given the power to decide what to do about climate change, everyday people make vastly different decisions from corporations. As we've all seen, corporations choose profits and more extraction. But what about people? In a 2014 experiment, researchers at Harvard and Yale tasked people with the responsibility of managing collective resources among themselves and for future generations. The expectation was that if capitalism is a true reflection of democracy and the natural tendency of humans, this study group would essentially arrive at the same conclusion as our modern capitalist economy. They would deplete their resources and screw over future generations in favor of immediate profits. After all,
guys, that's what the boomers did to us, bro. Not all were voting for their very specific interest when they were young. Then they got older, and now they're voting specifically for their very specific interest that are basically hurting the majority of like the millennials and below, right? The reason why they were able to get super cheap houses and all these other government funded programs, and then when they got older, they just were like, government funded programs are evil. That's what happened.
We're often told that it's human nature to be greedy, or that when resources are not privately owned, they succumb to the so-called tragedy of the commons. Everybody acts selfishly to the point of exhausting common resources. Since each individual has more to gain by acting selfishly than by making sure the common good is preserved for everyone, the philosophical experiment always ends with people ruining it for each other and is used to justify splitting up common goods into private hands. But like many experiments before it, the Harvard and Yale study found that the opposite is true. Researchers found that, on average, a full 68% of individuals chose to use their share sustainably, taking only as much as the pool could regenerate, sacrificing possible profits so that future generations could thrive. In other words,
that's how the
majority of people behave exactly the opposite of how economic theory predicts. More interestingly, when people were put in a democratic conversation about how to organize these resources as a group, since the overwhelming majority prioritized sustainability over profits, the group went forward with a strategy that would preserve their limited resources in perpetuity. They gave up profits. In other words, democracy works to combat climate change because when we're not broken up into little profit-maximizing machines, we make decisions that truly are better for everyone. And you don't have to trust this study by Harvard and Yale researchers if you don't want to. We've seen real-world examples of the same thing. Back in 2019, in response to the Yellow Vest protests, the French government gave everyday people a chance to exercise their democratic power. The government selected a group of 150 people completely randomly from all of France and tasked them with planning a 40% decrease in carbon emissions by 2030. Over the course of only 8 weekends, everyday people like you and me, not scientists, not academics, not politicians, people as young as 16 and as old as 80, more representative of the class, gender, and age makeup of the general population than the French Congress, all heard from experts, debated amongst themselves, and found ways to protect the environment. Not only that, they knew that after they were done, their propositions would be submitted to a national referendum, and if successful, would become actual law. It was a daunting task, and they weren't given very much time, but normal citizens stepped up and got to work. Like in the Harvard-Yale experiment, the assembly chose sustainability. They proposed banning all advertisements for the most polluting products like cars or plane rides, banning single-use plastic by 2023, banning internal flights of less than 4 hours in favor of trains, ending planned obsolescence.
Yeah, that could probably only work for Spain, for Europe, guys. Unfortunately, in the United States of America, we only have one real option, and that is a very slow Amtrak. I think, occasionally it may get to speeds of maybe like 100 plus miles an hour, a little bit, right? But nothing like what's in Europe. We have no high-speed trains. And then keep in mind, the car lobby, maybe 70 years ago, fought so hard against the trains. This is the reason why we don't have any real train systems, like passenger trains, really. That's why we don't have any, because the car lobby. More money in politics. Guys, it ruined it for us.
Obsolescence, making recycling mandatory for all plastic products, transitioning away from trucks as a means of transporting goods, making landlords renovate all buildings to be energy efficient by 2040, enforcing high taxes for polluting industries, and many, many more radical propositions in a list of about 150, which were noted in a publicly accessible 460-page document. So, what happened? Did France suddenly become a paradise of eco-utopianism? No. Within the first few sessions of the Assembly, its members realized that in order to achieve the kinds of measures that were necessary to prevent the most adverse climate change consequences, they would need to hurt industrial profits.
Yeah.
It was clear that capitalism was not compatible with this project. But people were willing to compromise some profits and some production for continued survivability. They made difficult decisions knowing it would mean a chance to continue living on a planet suited for human needs. They recognized the need for radicality, and in many ways, they embraced it. But of course, this didn't go over well with the government. Immediately, the neoliberal French president and his ministers descended on the assembly. In a series of speeches trying to divert the democratic process, France's politicians tried to get the assembly to be reasonable and not get too many crazy ideas, telling them there's no such thing as, quote, magic money, and other such claims intended to pacify their radical ambitions. Still, the assembly stayed the course and demanded change. But since messing with the assembly wasn't enough, Macron opted for outright denial. The referendum that was meant to take place at the end of the 8 weeks never did. In fact, most of the policies proposed by the assembly were either heavily watered down or, in a few instances, outright vetoed, as was the case for a proposed 4% tax on companies making more than 10 million euros to finance these projects. In stark contrast to the government's refusal, a national poll found that a majority of French people would have supported most measures. What this case shows is that people are ready for change, and they're ready to make difficult decisions.
But it's those people sitting at the top.
Capitalists aren't. What's it going to be? A brutal, dystopian, unlivable future for the majority of humanity, all so a few executives can keep their profits, or a brighter, fairer, sustainable future for us and for our children. A world where human flourishing matters more than the blood-soaked dollars in corporate bank accounts. Let's decide for ourselves, or we might lose the chance. I mentioned at the beginning of this video that this kind of content is made possible by my patrons on Patreon.
All right, so now we're running to an ad. Ooh. All right, guys, so listen. I never really looked at it like this, but I mean, once it's all, thrown in your face a little bit here, is capitalism absolutely destroying us? Yeah, by the sounds of it. Or how about this? The way that he just presented it, yeah. But even if you were not, oh God, guys, yeah, that's true. That's it. It's true. Yeah, they're destroying us. Absolutely, right? Our gigantic trucks, our our gas laden, plane trips that are less than 4 hours. Yeah, guys. Yeah, it is. Our mass producing of products just to be thrown into a landfill, disposable fashion. Yeah, I mean, guys, we have the most we have ever had in history. You and I, right? Doesn't matter. You have more than your ancestors had. Think about your 7th great grandfather. You have more than him. And you're probably younger than him. You achieved more in your life than he has ever. Probably. Right? You have more stuff, in the words of George Carlin, guys, right? And it's all based off of capitalism. And all of these things are being powered by something that is destroying the planet. So even if we attempt to kind of go over to some type of, green renewable energy source, right? Great, amazing. I love the idea of that. Sure, let's do it. How do we get the other countries that don't fall into our overall way of living, right, to follow suit? How can they? They can't. They literally just cannot. All right, guys, listen, this is a super depressing video. But all right, listen, let me know in the comments of the next thing from him that I should be checking out, and I will get into that as soon as I possibly can, guys. And if you are new here, please like and subscribe, guys. All right? Catch you guys later.